Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the February 13th, 2017 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission. If you would stand with us, please. Commissioner Chip Pinion would lead us in our prayer and our pledge. Chip.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for this time you've given us tonight to come together and do business of the county. Father, we thank you for giving us this opportunity to do so, for giving us the strength. Father, we ask tonight for your wisdom, your knowledge, and understanding to make the best decisions for our county as we proceed through the work tonight. Father, we pray for our nation. Father, we pray for our state, our county, our cities, Father, that you would just guide us and direct us, help us do all that we can for the betterment of everybody involved, Father. We ask you to continue to pray for our troops overseas as they serve us day in and day out. But most of all, we thank you for loving us in spite of our sins. We thank you and we love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Major. Call the roll, please, Gal.
Here. Jim Averwater. Here. Lee Vogel. Here. David Jones. Here. Will Burton. Here. Mike. Present. Craig Lynch. Here. Charles Keith. Mike. Here.
Present. Thank you, Gal. This time we need to approve the minutes of our last meeting. I'll call on our Vice Chair, Mike Kusch.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. There's two sets of minutes from the last two meetings that I reviewed and approved, so make a motion to accept those.
I have a motion and a second to approve two sets of minutes to our last two meetings. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? That motion carries. Any items withdrawn or deferred, Doug?
No, sir. Everything's on.
To go. Under item 6, new business, 6A, submitted for final plat approval. Item number 16-2023, Angler's Retreat, Section 1. This is reapproval, 37 lots, 35 of which are buildable on 29.31 acres on RM located along Powell's Chapel Road. Jonathan W. Trout is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and good evening, Commission members. Hope everybody's doing well today. This is probably pretty familiar to the Commission. The preliminary plan for this particular development was approved back in July of 2015. The final plat was originally approved by the Commission back in April of last year. Final plat approvals are only valid for 6 months. If they're not recorded within 6 months, then their approval expires, and that's what's happened in this situation. This is really just a reapproval of the plat that was approved back in April of last year. The plat's in good order. It just needs to have the reapproval by the Commission before it's recorded. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Doug, on the plat, on bullets, the comments on bullet 17 and 18, 17 mentions that there was supposed to be a geotechnical study done, and 18 says that per CUD that they needed some additional information or needed I'm sorry, they need a plot. I can't say it 3 times fast. Need a plot plan to CUD for approval.
Yes.
For certain lots. And so I'm just curious, have those things happened?
Well, as far as note 18 is concerned, before CUD will allow them to get a building permit on those lots, they'll have to have the plot plan. So that doesn't have to be done before the plat's recorded. The same really holds true for lots 22 and 23. We'll want to see a technical, geotechnical study on those lots, and they'll be marked as such at the on the plat after it's recorded. So when building permits, if somebody comes to try to get a building permit on it, building codes will see that, and then they'll mention that, and then they'll have to come up and talk to us. That doesn't preclude them recording the plat, but that would be prior to building permits on those lots.
I don't see that very often. What triggers the need for a geotechnical?
You pull the main plat back up. Around where they've got the detention pond was a sinkhole that they've modified. They've to work with this drainage plan to become part of their drainage system. So any of the lots that abut that have a minimum pad requirement. So when the pond fills up, spills over the road, the houses are high and dry. Any of the lots in the sinkhole area, original area, will require a grading plan.
Motion to approve in a second. Item number 16-2023. Any other questions? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you. Next is items for rezoning that require a public hearing. 6B, 17-A001, Patricia Sanders. Location is Armstrong Valley Road. Commission district is 8, which is Commissioner Pettis Reed's district. Size of the site is approximately 29 acres. Tax map is 137. Existing zoning is agricultural residential. Proposed zoning is residential medium density. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This property, along with you don't see it, let me go back a map, it'll be a little easier. This is the subject property here in red, and the surrounding property here, the remainder of that, it's about 330 acres of the additional tract right here. These were zoned agricultural residential when the new zoning ordinance took effect back in 2013. The larger farm, the 330 acres, is designated as under the Tennessee Land Trust, and there is documentation to that effect, but this area here that's under consideration tonight was not part of that designation. So the applicant would like to zone this area, which is currently zoned AR, back to RM, which is the predominant zoning in the area, in order to do a residential development on the property. In your agenda materials on the iPads, you'll see a concept plan that's in there. About 13 or so lots is what they're looking at, all with frontage along Armstrong Valley Road. It's a subdivision in the fact that they're under 5 acres, but not in the fact that there'll be any new right-of-way construction or any new roads or anything like that. Every one would have its own soil system for a septic tank. Of course, access to the property, again, would be on Armstrong Valley Road. This road is identified for improvements under the county's long-range transportation plan. We would evaluate to determine whether any right-of-way dedication is needed along that part where it fronts along Armstrong Valley Road, or maybe some shoulder improvements to the road. Again, that would just be something we would look at when we saw a plat for the property. No landscaping requirements for this, any buffering, because this is residential land, so there wouldn't be any buffering requirements. Since this property is not part of the Century Farm designation, or the Tennessee Land Trust, excuse me, considering that the zoning, again, is the predominant zoning in that area, RM, staff really doesn't have any issue with this, so we would recommend approval. The applicant is present and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Did they not have to apply to get this put in agriculture zone anyway? I mean, because we don't really
there
have
was,
anything. So
yeah, there was.
If it had been left alone, it'd be RM already.
Right, exactly. Yes, sir.
Since this is a predominant zone, it would have fallen into anyway. And if there are no further questions, I'll make a motion to approve.
But we need to have a public hearing first.
I'm sorry. I forgot all about the public hearing part.
Any other questions for staff? At this time, I'll declare a public hearing open for item number 17-A001, Patricia Sanders. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Will?
I'll try again. I'll make a motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
I have a motion to approve and a second, item number 17-A001. Other questions? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you. 6B2, item number 17-A002, Juvenal Sabrara. Location is northeast corner of John Bragg Highway and McElroy Road. Commission district is 4. County Commissioner is Robert P. Size of the site is approximately 5 acres. Tax map 110. Existing zoning is RM. Proposed zoning is commercial services. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I have the map of the property on the screen. Again, just to let the commission know, the same presentation is actually on your iPads as well if you wanted to take a closer look at any of these. This property, again, is being asked for rezoning to commercial services. According to information by the applicant, they would like to rezone this property in order to allow for commercial development. They really don't have any specific plans per se. They feel that the electric line easements on the property and the fact that it's bordered by 3 roads make residential use of the property unlikely. They would like to ultimately split the property into 2 separate tracts and have possible multiple uses such as retail, mechanic shop, church, office, just a variety of different uses. You can see on the map here, there's a very large TVA easement that cuts through the property. There's a large line. There's also a couple of Middle Tennessee electric easements right through here. There's just not a whole lot of usable property with this. There is a copy of a site survey that was done, included with your agenda materials. It does locate a soul site. So we also talk with our TDEC officials, and they have said that any soul sites encumbered by easements are off limits as well. So just something to keep in mind. With that, as far as access and parking is concerned, I mean, this site is bordered by 3 different rights-of-way. Of course, you've got Woodbury Pike right up here, which ends just past the property. Of course, you've got McElroy Road, then you've got John Bragg Highway. Any access onto John Bragg Highway, being a state road, of course, would require a state permit. As far as any landscaping or anything like that is concerned, anything that's zoned commercial services has to have a type 2 buffer adjacent to any property that's zoned residential. Again, being that it's bordered by 3 rights-of-way, there's not a whole lot of buffering in those areas, but there is some adjacent property here that's still zoned residential, so they would have to keep a buffer in this area. Of course, any commercial businesses, if this is rezoned, would have to meet the performance standards that are located in the zoning ordinance. Really, this is kind of a mixed bag as far as staff is concerned. We were neutral on this request. It is located within the one of the nodes of the comprehensive plan, the Kittrell Rural Center. John Bragg Highway really transitions from an urban corridor to a lesser designation, according to the plan, a rural scenic corridor at this intersection right here. It's more heavily used this way, not so much this way. So from that standpoint, the commercial zoning is more consistent with the comprehensive plan. That being said, there are a lot of development challenges with this property. Again, these electric easements through here really render pretty much just half the property usable. If the applicant wanted to actually try to split into 2 different lots, they would have to find soul sites for each of these lots. There's maybe about 2.5 acres outside of the electrical line easements. They might be able to find soil sites for both of those, but it's just a challenging site. I don't necessarily disagree with the applicant that residential use of this property is probably more unlikely, being that it's got frontage on 3 sides, especially one on John Bragg Highway. But that being said, no matter what you put here, it's going to be a challenge to develop it. So let me just run through some photos. This is the end of the Woodbury Pike, Old Woodbury Pike. That's the intersection there at John Bragg and McElroy, and this is looking down Woodbury Pike. That's the McElroy Road and John Bragg Highway intersection there, looking out on John Bragg. There's several pictures here because there were so many different frontages. That's the TVA line you can see right there going through the property. A closer look of that. Again, that's looking back, that'd be looking toward the east, excuse me. Some of the existing residential development in the area. And again, if you want to look at these pictures in greater detail, they are on your iPads. The applicant is present. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
I believe it's the upper north end of that property where the electrical easements are. Can anything be done with that corner at all? Anything?
In this area? I think it's doubtful, just because of the fact that you're not only dealing with the fact that you have to deal with soil sites, but also setbacks and everything. These are all front yards, and it's just so difficult in this area because there's just not a whole lot of area outside of these easements. Now, with a lot of these electrical easements, you can put parking areas and things in them. They will let you do that, but there's just not a whole lot of area there. I think just looking at this, you're going to be really limited to this side of the property.
Doug, again on those soil sites, if I'm understanding you correctly, what is on this survey, those two designated soil sites will not work because they are in the easement, and so he has to find other sites for that. Was that my understanding?
That's our understanding, yes, sir, after talking to TDEC officials. That's correct.
There still is about 2.3, 2.5 acres, roughly half the sites outside of the easements. So, I mean, it's not impossible to find another site, but it's going to be challenging.
But again, that goes for any development. If it's residential, commercial, it doesn't really matter. It's, regardless of what it is, it's going to be challenging.
Questions for staff?
So do we have a usable soil site now that's out from under the power lines? I'm a little confused here.
Right. No, the survey that we saw had the soil sites underneath the TVA easement and maybe the Middle Tennessee Electric easement. But under the TDEC's current rules, they don't allow. Yeah, well, actually, they're both in the TVA easement. Yeah, but under their current rules, they don't allow it in easements.
Public hearing. This time we'll declare a public hearing open for item number 17-A002 from residential medium density to commercial services. Is the applicant available, or a representative of the applicant? If you'd come forward, please, and give us your if you would kind of clarify maybe what your plans are, if you know, and how you're going to overcome all of the different issues that this property.
Should I speak here?
Speak in that direction, if you would.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Mikesove. I am representing the owner of the land that doesn't speak any English, and neither me. But anyway, enough to talk to you today. His name is Juvenal Sarabia. Juvenal bought this piece of land almost 2 years ago, and he bought it because he wants to build a house in there. But when he see the location of the house that is surrounded by 3 major roads, he knew that immediately that he cannot use the property for the purpose that he bought the property, which is a residential area. So he decided to become commercial, so he can do some commercials in there for multiple uses. At this time, he don't have any selected business. He do have a business of landscaping. And right now, we don't know exactly what we're going to do there, but after he talking to me and me talking to the family, we decided to put a shop over there, a mechanic shop, or have the place available for office or some kind of office. And so we're trying to turn this residential into a commercial. Based mainly because of the easements that we have in there, all of the electrical, all of the TVA. doesn't allow us to build anything pretty much in half of the land, but we're still having a good juicy area, about 3 acres, 2.5 to 3 acres that we can, which is in the main John Brad highway, that we can have even a shop over there, mechanic shop, or some kind of gas station, or some kind of any kind of office in there, retail office. So we basically just want to turn this one into a commercial. I don't think myself, if you go over there, you're gonna feel the same thing that I feel. It is not a residential, by any means. It's not a residential line, and we're respectfully requesting to this joint over here to give us a yes for a commercial. Thank you very much.
Questions?
Yeah, I had a question. I noticed on the picture here, there's a real estate sign. So are you is he trying to sell the property and it's not able to sell it in its present condition?
Yeah, in the present condition, he cannot sell it. Thank you very much for asking that. I want to say also that I'm a real estate agent. I'm friend of the family, but real estate agent, and that sign right there belongs to me. There's no any potential to sell that one as a residential. As a matter of fact, I have 2 investors that has called me for residential to see if they can develop in the land, but they told me, Tony, I cannot, there's nothing I can do in there, as a residential. And I'm being told by several people already that the best option that we have is just to turn it into a commercial. Thank you for asking.
Questions of the applicant? Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Seeing no one else, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
Doug, everything he said possibly for business, he was talking about a mechanic shop and, I don't know, 2 or 3 other things he said. Does that fit into what this zoning is going to be?
I believe so. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things like a landscape business, that would be under commercial services. Offices are allowed under that. A lot of it depends on what kind of mechanic shop he's talking about. Automobile mechanics. Let me just double check, but I'm pretty sure that is as well. Let's see. Yeah, automobile servicing and repair, light repair, is permitted in that zone as well. So most of what he's talking about, I mean, outside of any real heavy repair kind of thing would be allowed. So yeah, there's really no issue there.
Doug, if we rezone this and there's not another soil site available and it's rezoned, what can be done with it then? I think that's the question.
Well, at that point, I mean, we run into this sometime even with residential land. Sometimes they're not unable to find a soil site even on residential property. Usually what we encourage the applicant to do at that point is to talk with the state, TDEC, to determine if there's any alternate systems that are available that could help them perhaps still develop the site. A lot of the times commercial establishments don't have the same septic soil needs that a residential unit does, just because there's no dishes being washed, there's no showers or baths being taken, so the usage is a lot lower. So even if he is not able to find soil, there may be a way to do an alternate system. You know, a lot of that's up to the state as far as what other systems may be available, but that's what we would encourage them to do.
One more question is the commissioner called in, is Commissioner P called in, and have you had any calls from the neighbors?
Well, I have had some calls from the neighbors. There actually is one present right now. I did talk with Commissioner P when this was application was first made. I gave him the information on it because we were talking about it. Since that time, I hadn't had any other conversations with him, so he hasn't indicated one way or the other if he has an issue with it.
Doug, can you tell me how far it is to the next piece of non-residential property? I don't see anything else on the map right there adjacent. I saw a sign up across McElroy.
This is really just right down the road, and exactly how far, let me see.
The rezone one a couple of months ago.
Exactly, and that's the one I was thinking about. Let me go back here, I'm in the wrong next application. It's a little ways down there. The nearest fire hydrant to this particular property is about 1,700 feet to the west, which is not that far from where that property we looked at a couple months ago was. So it's in the same general area. It's within that same node, that same development node on the comprehensive plan. So maybe half a mile at the most, based on my recollection. Like you said, the map doesn't go out much further than what we're looking at here.
One thing that worries me is I see a pretty restricted piece of property with property lines. You mentioned the easements and all. And if we zone this, then is the applicant going to be right back in front of BZ asking for relief from some of these setbacks and all because the piece of property won't work for a whole lot of stuff? I mean, are we setting the applicant up for failure or painting ourselves into a corner to some extent by putting taking a difficult piece of property and proceeding it down the process? I mean,
right now,
I'd hate to see this back at BZA in 6 weeks with 7 variances asked for to be able to make something work there or something.
Now, and I understand where you're going with that. Now, what I would say is he still has about half the site that's usable, quote unquote, you know, outside of the easements. And easements are not something that the Board of Zoning Appeals can grant a variance to, that, you know, that they can be right up to the easement line. There's not usually a setback line from the easement, so the easement lines are what they are. 2.5 acres or so is still a good amount of land to use for any kind of a development. That being said as well, depending on where access to the property would be, like for instance along Woodbury Pike, if they didn't have an access on there, that could be treated as a rear yard as opposed to a front. So that does give them a little bit of flexibility as far as setbacks and things. But I understand what you're saying.
But it wouldn't necessarily have 3 front yard setbacks.
Correct. Now, and of course,
orientation of the building on the site.
Right. Now, of course, one of the setbacks, the front setbacks being here on McElroy, I mean, there's really nothing they're going to be able to do over here anyway because of all these easements. There's just really no practical way to put a building over here that I can see. Mostly it's going to be over in this area. This would be a side setback right here. Can you all see the arrow? Okay. This would be a front, especially if they decide to come off here. This would be a front. You know, I could envision maybe, you know, if they do access off of here, of course, that does kind of open it up to 2 fronts. But if there was a way to create an access, it'd be a little bit longer, but an access over here, that way people don't have to come down here, go back around and try to get in. If people could come in off of McElroy Road, I could see that being a more viable access, and then maybe one off of John Bragg Highway if they wanted to keep this, you know, no access up here. I mean, really, there's only a few houses down this way. The only reason to come down this way, this far, where the road ends is if you really live down here, or if you're driving and don't know the road ends. So, but there's plenty of signage there that tells you just that. So, really, if you don't live down there, that's the only reason to even traverse this part of it. So, it might make more sense to just try to run something off here and, you know, use John Bragg Highway. So, there are constraints, but the constraints with the front yards can be mitigated. Again, there's really nothing you can do over here, and this could be a rear yard if they wanted it to be.
What you're saying, that really the only buildable part of the portion of the property is east of the TVA easement then?
That's kind of looking at that survey that they had done. That's what it looks like to me. And Mike, I mean, you may agree, disagree.
Typically, like Doug mentioned earlier, you could still put a parking lot underneath it with, you know, TVA's and Middle Tennessee Electric's approval.
And if you did build something on that east side, then it could be accessed and the driveway could come under the TVA easements. That's permissible.
This is a fairly decent-sized lot. It's 5 acres, including all the easement areas. So if someone wanted to open up a small engine repair and, you know, like the guy did on Woodbury Road a couple of months ago, this would be a much better site to open up something like that than the one that was requested a couple of months back. And storage or parking up under the easements might be permitted for those type of things, like tractor sales or yard mower sales or something like that, right?
Equipment sales, not so much vehicle sales. Small equipment sales, that may be okay, but not like car or anything like that.
So from that perspective, commercial services would be a much better use for this piece of property than retail. And I'm sorry, as far as residential. So
Yeah, I don't, and like I said in my comments, I really don't disagree that, is this going to be a good residential property with all the constraints it has? I don't think it is. But, of course, that's just my opinion. So.
I guess one of the dilemmas that I have is if we don't allow this rezoning, what could ever be done with this piece of property? A guy's got a piece of property he can't ever use for anything. And I've got a little bit of kind of an issue or concern about that. And if we were to approve this, anything that happens on that piece of property has to come back for a site plan.
Yes, absolutely. That's correct. Detention, drainage, all that.
Basic drainage would flow from east to west, sort of down towards McElroy Road.
I don't know if I have the contours available.
I'm just trying to remember from my memory,
Mike, you said the field lines cannot be put under the TV. It used to be that they could, though, didn't
Used to be they could, but I checked just for this particular instance because currently the plats we're seeing now, the soil sites are outside the easement areas when we see a plat or a plan or anything like that. So when I saw the property survey for this property, I specifically went over to the state office and, hey, can they do this? And they said, no, not under today's rules. Now, the state usually, well, I won't say usually, but they have in the past allowed like a porta potty contract or something like that, full long-term contract to provide service if septic soils are not available on a site. They usually don't allow it for a residence, but they would for a business.
Doug, you said you were neutral on all this. Make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve and a second. Item number 17-A002 to commercial services. Other questions? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Opposition? The motion to approve carries. Thank you.
I might point out to the applicants where this will go to the full commission, being as they probably don't do this every few days, if you don't mind.
Already done that. These rezoning requests, all of them will have to be approved by the full county commission, and these will go before the county commission in March, and I believe that date is March 16th, which will be Thursday at 6 o'clock in this room. March 16th at 6 p.m. I believe all of the rezonings will be on the agenda for 6:30 that night. Thank you, Will. 6B3, item number 17-A003, Don Bruce, 6640 Shores Road. Commission district is 20. County Commissioner is Trey Gooch. Size of the site is approximately 24 acres, tax map 94. Existing zoning is commercial neighborhood. Proposed zoning is light industrial. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This property has been the subject of a number of zoning requests over the years. Back in June of 1999, the property was zoned to retail and wholesale trade, which was a old designation under the older zoning ordinance, and had a conditional use permit to allow the sale of used trucks, farm and construction equipment. You'll recall under the older zoning resolution, there were no permitted uses by right in commercial zones. They were all done by conditional use permit. This CUP was voided by the planning director back in 2001, I believe, according to the procedures in that last zoning resolution. That decision was appealed to the Board of Zoning Appeals in July of 2001, which that decision was ultimately upheld in July of 2001. In May of 2004, the applicant did make a request to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a vehicle dead storage lot, but was denied. He then applied for and received a conditional use for the sale of used cars, truck, and machinery in August of 2004. And I've attached a copy of that conditional use permit with your agenda materials. You'll find it on your iPads. There were also some other applications for billboards and things that were either denied or ultimately withdrawn by the applicant, ultimately. During the zoning ordinance update back in 2012, staff made a recommendation to zone this property back to residential RM due to the fact that there was no commercial use that had ever been established on the property and the CUP had been voided. Since the uses that were originally approved would have required a more intense zoning classification, that was the reason we wanted to zone it back to RM. Under the new zoning classifications we have, there's a lot more permitted uses that can be had under the new zoning laws than what he had previously. During one of the Planning Commission meetings, when we were discussing the zoning of property under the new ordinance, the applicant requested to retain a non-residential zoning designation for the property. So ultimately, we went with a commercial neighborhood for that property, which took effect January 1st of 2013. The applicant's requesting light industrial zoning classification for the property now. The uses that he originally identified would be allowed in light industrial, but they would also be allowed in the commercial general districts. Really, most of the uses that he is proposing would also be allowed in the commercial services, with the exception, really, of the automobile or vehicle sales. After, of course, looking at this, access and parking, of course, would have to be, there's no concept plan, but it would have to be on Shores Road. Shores Road is really more just of a residential minor road. There's really not just a whole lot of traffic that's carried on this road. And I don't know how comfortable I am with larger, trucks accessing this road day in and day out on something that could be zoned like light industrial or something like that. You'll also see that this is within the Almaville Road employment district. It's kind of, it's closer in, but not as close to like the central area of that, but it is within that node. It's also identified under Smyrna's comprehensive plan. We talked with, sent this information over to their planning staff, Kevin Rigsby. He replied that they really had this area pegged more for commercial development than they did industrial development. With that being all said, of course, the applicant does have a lot more allowable uses under the current zoning ordinance than he did originally with his original conditional use permit. It is true that the uses he proposed for the property are not allowed in CN. Staff, myself particularly, I just don't feel that light industrial really is the most desirable classification for this property. It is bordered by I-840 to the north. But the area is predominantly single-family around this. On the other side of the interstate, you can see on the map, this is the South Haven development, and just off the map, we just received a preliminary plan for a new development right adjacent to South Haven. So while it's separated by 840, there's still quite a bit of just residential development in that area. The property is already zoned CN. We would be more comfortable with either commercial services or commercial general for the property, not necessarily light industrial. CG especially would still allow him the uses that he was granted under his original conditional use permit without having to go to an industrial classification. The applicant is present. We did recommend denial of this application as presented with light industrial, but again, we would feel more comfortable with a different commercial zoning designation. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Pictures, I'm sorry, I always forget to do this. This is looking onto the property, looking down Shores. Very limited shoulders and things on this land. Again, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff?
How far is it from this property to Almoville Road, I guess would be where Shores Road runs into, is that right? I see old
Ultimately, I don't know the exact distance. It's closer to the Almoville side than it is the Veterans part,
Yeah.
You can kind of see, of course, this is Ocala Road right here. Of course, this is South Haven. The off-ramp to 840 is just a little further up here. It's not that much farther down the road.
That's what I was thinking.
Just right down there. And it's within that node, and that node is centered on the interchange, which is about a mile out. So it's no further than that.
Yeah, it's about half a mile.
Yeah.
Questions for staff? Ready for our public hearing? This time I'll declare a public hearing open for item number 17-A003 for Don wishing to speak. Would the applicant like to make any comments? Just Mr. Bruce?
If you would, 0, yeah, oh, that's why I've got a sign on that fence right there that says, Don Bruce put my phone number.
Oh.
Put on there several years ago. I did, excuse me, I'm supposed to be looking this way. I'm Don Bruce. I own a property. I live at 1911 Haynes Drive, Murfreesboro, and I've owned this property 20-something years. Referring back to what Mr. Demosi was reading there, I did have a conditional use permit that John Davis took away from me in 2001, I guess. But I had a stroke in 2000. I laid up for about 6 months before I was able to get out and about. And then I was very limited to what I did for another 6 months. So I was pretty much out of commission for over a year during that time frame. I didn't feel like they should have took my permit, but they had a clause in the language back then that if you didn't make enough progress on a piece of property within a year, that they could withdraw your permit. He did do that, but like I say, I was laid up with a stroke for pretty much a year. Still residual effects of it, and back to the property. I did run a used equipment lot there for a while. Economy got bad. A lot of businesses closed up. I closed up. You know, you couldn't give anything away. The big dozer you saw sitting there, there was a lot of those hauled and sold for scrap iron, you know, because they wasn't worth anything except for the scrap iron price. And now I've got someone that's interested in the piece of property right now. I've got an offer on the table. A nice company that does underground utilities, and they bore under railroads, lakes, airport runways. They lay fiber optic cable. They do a lot of the work like you see is going along the interstate where they're laying the cable between exits for the where everybody can turn on the news and see what the weather's like at a certain exit. And so they're a very good company. This is not a nickel and dime project, and would cost time the price of the land and them building a building would probably be pushing north of $750,000. And that area out there, like Mr. Demosi said, is in the Rutherford County Comprehensive Zone Plan, and it's determined to be a commercial zone, and it's also in the Averwater Employment Center, which allows light industrial. And the people that's looking at the property, they do own quite a bit of equipment, some tractor and trailers, boring machines, rock saws, track hoes, different things. And they need a place where they can bring their equipment in at the end of the job and let it sit for a little while until they've got to move it again, or maybe do some maintenance on it, have a maintenance base. And all that area out there is getting ready to grow, because the school board has got an option to buy 120 acres, or 100-something acres right down there at the corner of the old Averwater Road, which is, and they're planning on putting 3 schools there. And so that area is going to change a whole lot, probably in the next 5 years. And back to the question, how far it is from my property down to Averwater Road is about a mile. And it's a good road. There's plenty of room for a tractor and trailer or anything to operate up and down that road without any problem. And you know, I just took a ride out last week to Smyrna Ready Mix out off of whatever road it is out towards Smyrna. And if anybody can run a commercial business on a road that size, you know, my road almost looks like an interstate compared to the little road that Smyrna Ready Mix runs all those ready mix trucks back there to their site. And anyway, I didn't realize that they was taking my commercial zoning away from these tracts of land. I had 4 that was zoned commercial. My nephew was looking for a place to put a mulch yard, so he went up and was looking over my pieces at the planning department to see what was allowed on each one of them. And he called me up and he said, did you realize they're taking commercial zoning away from all your property? I said, that's the first I've heard about it, you know. So I went to the next meeting, and if I ain't mistaken, this lady here was at that meeting. And she may have not been, but I think she was. And she was one of them that stood up for me and said it wasn't right to take my commercial zonings away from me because we ended up with a commercial neighborhood. Of course, at that time, I had never saw a new copy of the zoning ordinance. I didn't have an idea what a commercial zone, commercial neighborhood zoning was. And so basically, I've got a good piece of property out there that's be good for the type of business that these people want to operate there, but it's not a real desirable piece for residential. You know, I've got 4 good soil sites on it, but about 4 houses, about all you can get on it. And of course, all those places along Shores Road, the biggest part of them, when they built 840, it cut the back part of their farms off. And so one of the big subdivision that's going in on what they call Old Calla Road now came off the back of the place that I own. I just own a little bit of the front, And anyway, I guess I've said enough. and if y'all have got any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them for you.
Mr. Bruce, have you had any conversations with any of the neighbors out there about this plan?
I haven't. I tried to call Mr. Gooch. I called up to the planning, and they gave me Mr. Gooch's phone number. But when I called his number, he said it's full, and you cannot leave a message. And he didn't call me back, and I didn't call him back. Now, the neighbors out there, I'm in usually a pretty good dialogue with all those folks. I've never had any problems with them. And so I don't know if they got any calls on this or not.
If I may, yeah, we did receive some phone calls on this. One as recently as today. There was one who called, was opposed to the light industrial zoning. We did get some other informational calls as well on this.
All those places, one of these days will be for sale. Nothing is ever not for sale forever usually. And anyway, if y'all have got any questions, I'll try to answer them.
For Mr. Bruce.
Doug, the business he's talking about, commercial services or commercial general, would work?
It would work for that, yes, sir. Either one.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak for or against this rezoning request? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. The question that Craig just asked covered those with Mr. Bruce?
I don't remember if I specifically covered them with him or not. I know that the person he's talking about has been into our office. When he originally came in, the person he's referring to, I think I recommended to him that commercial services would work. So commercial services or general, either one would work. I mean, light industrial, of course, would as well. But I haven't had any direct conversation with Mr. Bruce about it.
Doug, I'm very concerned about going straight to light industrial, primarily because as we, in your notes and as we have gone through the planning process, we identified that something like a commercial neighborhood is going to be there to sort of reduce objectionable influences to the community, bring them services and complementary things to an area that has been primarily residential. And so it causes me some heartburn to go straight to light industrial, and it honestly causes me a little heartburn to possibly even go to commercial services or commercial general, given the type of work that he's talking about that's going to be done there. Is there anything from a planning standpoint that I'm missing that would?
I mean, no, not that I can think of. I mean.
Doug, I was under the impression that commercial services wouldn't allow heavy equipment to be stored and things like that.
Well, something what he's talking about, we would put under construction sales and service. like a contractor's type business or something like that, which is fairly open as far as that goes. Now, there are provisions as far as outside storage and things has to be well screened and things like that, but I would anticipate they'd have to have a building. They probably would want to keep a lot of these things indoors. You know, I can't imagine a lot of this stuff they'd want to keep outdoors. So I mean, it just depends on what your definition of heavy equipment is. Landscape businesses sometimes have larger vehicles as well, and we classify them the same.
Well, he's talking about the heavy equipment, trackhoes, bulldozers, you know, rock saws. That's big stuff. And usually that stuff does stay outside unless you have a shop building you pull it in, do the maintenance and all. And I didn't know if, and I thought commercial services is more or less our entry-level commercial zone.
Well, commercial neighborhood is.
Neighborhood is.
Right,
okay,
yeah, services is the next step up.
I would just wonder if wanting to verify commercial services would allow. He does have a valid point. He had although it was 16 years ago, he had a commercial approval for commercial services, but that's getting how far we can go back to look at what was there at the turn of the century, you know, but I don't know. I couldn't support light industrial by any means, but I just don't know what is appropriate. This has got some similarities to the piece of property we just looked at. It's not really a good spot for somebody to build a house, although I'm not sure how good Shores Road is, the intersection of Allenville Road, encouraging semi-traffic and things like that. So.
And one of my issues with light industrial zoning too is, you know, depending on the use, even if that use ends up not being what ends up being on the property, if you open up the light industrial and you start getting into things like distribution, I mean, it's not a huge site, so I mean, you're not going to get just like a huge type business there. I mean, it is several acres, but, you know, from like a distribution standpoint, I mean, I wouldn't want to see, you know, constant 18-wheeler traffic in and out. You know, the type of business he's talking about, if it is larger equipment, it's probably more limited as far as the number of trips that they'd be making. Yeah, so I'm more comfortable with that.
I look back or thinking back 17 years ago when they were originally zoned this commercial, or maybe even further, and just you know, thinking what that property was at that time, how they even came up with the commercial zoning for it at all. You know, this Shores Road is not a great road. I've driven it many times, and so maybe the area is growing now and it can take the commercial, but I have an awful lot of concerns about the light industrial. This is a 24-acre tract. It's close to the interstate. I'm just really concerned that could open up the door for something a whole lot heavier than what the applicant is describing at this point. And I just don't want to go there and impose that upon the neighbors. I just have a real problem with light industrial.
Let me add on to Commissioner Averwater's thought process there. This is our last really untapped virgin land with a major 840 interstate through it. It's a gateway now from Williamson County to Rutherford County. We've got some really nice subdivisions coming up around it. We don't have a lot of, well, we don't have any ugliness on this section of property. Planning is about planning for the future. That's what we're here for. That's what we signed up for. You got to remember 840 is mostly elevated. So anything you look at from the road, you're looking down at these properties. So screening is not going to do you any good. Looking at a heavy industrial equipment sitting on a pad of crushed stone, which would probably be the case here. You know, you grant one, then you have to start allowing more. So this particular section of property outside of Murfreesboro and in the county, I think takes a little extra amount of scrutiny, because this is our last untapped, and he said it in his discussion. We've got schools tapped for this area. We would love to see some commercial, some restaurants, some shops. I mean, this is the kind of vision that we have for this area, not industrial. not construction equipment. We've got car sales, we've got that located in a certain part of town now. So, we've got to be very particular about what goes on here. So, this is not a public hearing, correct, Chairman? It's closed? Okay, I'm going to make a motion to deny the application for light industrial.
We have a motion and a second to deny item number 17-A003 for Don Bruce. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion to not approve, please say aye. Any opposition? The motion to deny is approved. Any other old business or staff reports? Or
Nothing formal. I just wanted to let the Planning Commission know that we had our most recent deadline for plats and plans this past Friday, and we got one of the biggest submittals that we've received since I've been around. I think we had 6 preliminary plans that we'll be looking at, several final plats, 3 or 4 site plans, and we also got 4 or 5 rezonings in. So it'll be kind of busy for Planning Commission over the next month or 2. So, and this is usually we start ramping up in the spring, and we're still kind of, getting the late winter now. So it doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon. So just want to make you aware of that.
Pack a lunch for the next Planning Commission meeting.
Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, February 27th, 9 a.m. in the Planning Mess.
Doug, I don't know where I'm pulling this from in my memory. I could be completely wrong. I was thinking that 840 was sort of a gateway corridor that was not going to allow billboards. Is that right?
Well, at one time, it was designated as a state route. When they changed the designation to an interstate, I actually have an email from the state. I've had some discussions with them. It's not a protected corridor in Rutherford County like it is in Williamson County. And Lee, you may know more about this, so correct me if I'm saying anything out of turn. Actually, Lee's the one that gave me the contact person at TDOT I needed to talk to. But basically what needs to happen, anybody that wants to put a billboard along 840 would have to talk to the state, and then they'd have to make sure that their distances are okay. But then they'd fall back on the county regulations at that point, being that it's an interstate now.
So what would we need to do to make it a protected corridor, or is that even possible now?
As far as changing the designation, that's something I think TDOT would have to do. I don't know, Lee, you may know how that works. The only other way would be in the zoning ordinance would be to look at because right now we just have interstate signs. At the time it was just 24. We didn't have to worry about it. But the only other way to do it would be change the ordinance to say I-24 and take out 840, which I don't know. I'd have to really look into that to see look at the legalities of something like that.
I just really support Commissioner Kusch's comments about, this being a gateway corridor for us, especially coming from Williamson County. I know there's parts of Tennessee where when you cross the line from Tennessee to Alabama, you're in Alabama because how bad the road is. I don't want that to be what it's like for people coming from Williamson County to Rutherford County and seeing that big of a change in what that corridor looks like. So if there's just some way to investigate that, I'd just be interested to know if we can do it.
Certainly look at that.
Anything else, Commission? Thank you for your time and your participation tonight. With that, happy Valentine's Day, and we're adjourned.